OneVentures is a venture capital firm with $320 million in funds under management. We invest in breakthrough technologies in healthcare and technology, from areas like medical devices through to pharmaceuticals, to education, enterprise software, mobile, virtual reality, and everything in between. So the board of directors is a governing body that sits above the organisation's executive team. And they typically have a number of key roles. One of them is working with the company on strategic direction and monitoring the progress of the company through the implementation of the strategic plan. Another is helping with big decisions, for example, hiring and firing of the key executives, perhaps outsourcing to different service providers, say manufacturers if we're talking about device type companies, and also then with the sort of financial management of the company. So monitoring the company's finances and ensuring that they're on track, that they remain solvent, that they've got sufficient capital to action their strategic plans. They also have a responsibility around things like regulatory and compliance to ensure that all of the company's various obligations are being met. The board of directors has an important role in assisting the company in terms of being able to achieve its strategic goals. So, for example, a really good board of directors will open up their networks to the benefit of the company, provide really great mentoring, coaching and guidance to the senior executives of the firm, and be really value adding. So I would always counsel founders to set up a board of directors as early as possible in the life cycle of the company. Well, there's not really any one formula, but often the way that boards are comprised is there'll be representatives of the shareholders. So typically the founder will sit on the board of directors. There'll be representatives of the investors who will also be shareholders, and there will sometimes be independent directors. In fact, this is something that can be really valuable in a company. So someone that's got no conflict of interest in terms of ownership but can bring external expertise onto the board. And often boards are comprised of odd numbers of individuals because if there's a vote, that gives you the ability to have a majority vote. But also because that sort of diversity of opinion can be really, really important in terms of ensuring that you make the right decisions and have the right conversations in the boardroom. So boards should be diverse, they should have good networks and a broad range of expertise. So board meetings are typically held every, say, 1 to 3 months, depending on the maturity of the company. And they'll start with a whole lot of sort of kind of standard business items like, attendance and minutes and actions from the previous meetings and governance sort of type items, and then move pretty quickly into discussing matters of strategic importance for the company. So often high on the agenda is the management financials for the company, how it's performed against budget since the last board meeting, and if there's any issues that need to be discussed, then they'll be given a high priority. Then the board will move on into talking about how the company is performing against the various goals that have been set as part of the strategic plan. How we're going on technical goals is often a really important matter of discussion for startup companies. How we're performing in terms of revenue, customer acquisition, implementation of product into our customer sites, for example. How we're going on hiring. Are we meeting our hiring plan? Are our team performing? All those sorts of key strategic matters that go to building value in a company. Well, let's just assume that the founder is the CEO for the sake of this conversation. So where the founder is the CEO, they'll typically work with the other members of the executive team and the chairman to put together the agenda and the papers prior to the board meeting. And then their responsibility will be, at the direction of the chair of the board, to present the CEO's report, which will typically be a report of how the company is tracking against its goals, and to present other elements of the business for discussion with the board of directors. So then they will be probably in the situation where they're kind of wearing two hats in the board meeting. So they're an executive of the company as the CEO, and they're also a shareholder and a director. So as a director, they'll be engaged with the other directors in that sort of strategic and governance discussion that we spoke about earlier. Well, generally, venture capitalists will be shareholders as well as directors. So they have a responsibility, as all directors do, to represent the interests of all shareholders. And this is a really important principle for founders to remember as well. There's a bit of a myth that venture capitalists are there to protect their own interests, but as a director, all directors must represent equally the interests of all shareholders. So the role of a VC is the same as the role of all of the other directors, to help monitor and support the company, to grow value in the interests of all of the shareholders. But of course, a good VC will also bring an enormous amount of expertise based on their own past experience in growing and building companies, and also the benefit of their networks, which they will open up to the benefit of the company. Well, at OneVentures, we're very active hands-on directors. So we will, for example, assist with hiring key executives. We'll assist with difficult human resource issues, whether that's performance management or in certain circumstances managing things like redundancies. We'll assist with opening up our networks. So perhaps, for example, helping the CEO or the business development team to connect at the right level within companies that might become customers or important strategic partners. And that's one of the benefits that, for example, we can bring to the company through our own personal networks, but also through the networks of our investors and other stakeholders. We'll also assist, for example, with capital raising. So very often the venture capitalist director on the board will take a very active role in that capital raising process, not only through contributing follow-on funding, but also by bringing other investors alongside the current investors to expand the pool of capital that's available. I think a really important distinction for founders to understand is that when they're sitting on the board of directors, they've often got three responsibilities. The first one is as an executive of the company, so they're an employee, so they've got that employee relationship, probably as the CEO, if that's in this case. The second responsibility is as a director representing the interests of all shareholders, and a very important distinction to make. And then the third is as a shareholder in their own right. And those different hats need to be worn with care in different parts of the conversation around the boardroom table. In certain circumstances, there can be conflicts of interest between those different roles. And I think founders need to have a good appreciation for the difference between those different roles.